What's up everyone? Alex here. Not many people on YouTube talk about how incredible game soundtracks are, particularly because we get copyright strikes when we even sample a song here and there. But we all know that there have been a plethora of JRPG soundtracks that we've listened to over the years that just truly touched us like none other. And so, in this video, I decided to invite 9 of my favorite YouTubers to talk about their favorite JRPG soundtracks. And if you don't see your favorite soundtracks here, I want you to share it in the comments below, and tell us how those tracks made you feel. But before that, I just want to do a quick shout out to my subscribers on Patreon who are sponsoring this video. Over the past year, we've released more than 95 early access videos, including this one. That's almost 2 videos a week. So if you want to be involved behind the scenes, get early access to reviews, list videos, and more, as well as have your name in each video's credits, head on over to patreon.com/backlogbattle and become a patron.
Hi, this is Emily from Orbalology, and one of my favorite JRPG soundtracks that I'll be sharing today is the one from Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Now, I'm no music expert, but one of the things I really love about the Xenoblade 2 OST is just how complementary it is throughout the story, as well as just how much variety there is. Each world has its own unique theme, both a day and night version, and it's just really suitable whenever you go exploring and really makes you excited to kind of check out every nook and cranny the world has to offer. For example, I just loved how energetic the more ordained day theme was, in contrast to how soothing and beautiful a lot of the night tracks were, particularly in Uriah. And the battle themes are some of the major highlights throughout the soundtrack. Again, you're treated to a variety of different epic battle themes. Some of those guitar solos and just how upbeat everything was just really enhanced the entire battle experience and made it a lot more fun. There are also some areas with some very haunting a cappella that really just play into the religious undertones that we've seen throughout the Xeno games. The soundtrack also evoked a lot of emotions, especially during the heartbreaking scenes playing Drifting Soul. And just the composition of that song, accompanied with the English lyrics, really just encapsulated the theme of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and where these characters are trying to find where they belong. And the scenes that they played, Drifting Void or Drifting Soul, were just heart-wrenching. The Xenoblade Chronicles 2 OST is just an emotional journey and really plays into all the emotional highs and lows throughout the story. And for this reason, it's one of my favorite soundtracks of all time.
Hey everybody, it's SuperDerek. Breath of Fire 3's soundtrack is one of my favorites of all time. Now there's a litany of other more conventional choices that I could be talking about right now, but I chose to talk about Breath of Fire 3 specifically because I know that all of those other games are gonna have their say. They're gonna, somewhere or other, maybe not in this video, but maybe in other videos, those other games that I'm thinking of are gonna get their fair shake. But Breath of Fire 3 was a trailblazer of an RPG when it comes to its soundtrack. Because I don't know about you, but when I think of RPGs, I can tell you that one of the last things that I ever expected was funky bass lines accompanied by jazz flute and a xylophone for good measure. Look no further than What Do You Mean Half Done to get an earful of every reason that Breath of Fire 3 is just absolutely off and doing its own thing. Breath of Fire 3 brings the jazz nearly 2 decades before Persona 5 would make it cool again. Now, that's not to say that Breath of Fire 3 didn't wear its own inspirations on its sleeves, of course. Compare Falling Green from Cedar Woods to Secret of the Forest from Chrono Trigger. They're both very similar, though Breath of Fire 3 went with like a harpsichord rather than a piano. I'm sure that there are other similarities elsewhere, but who knows, maybe Mitsuda's acid jazz soundtrack of Chrono Trigger called The Brink of Time went on to influence Breath of Fire 3's soundtrack. I don't know, that's just conjecture on my part. The fact that the game has one of the best fishing minigames of all time, by the way, is probably helped in no small part by the song A Perfect Day, which of course makes every day feel exactly like that. The perfect day. And that, when you're playing the fishing minigame, is exactly what you're going to get. Even the final boss track of the game, Self-Determination, goes absolutely bonkers. It's foreboding and intense, and yet at the same time, when you hear it, there's no chorus echoing in Latin, no violins to be heard in the distance. just some galloping hi-hats and some synth piano and a lead guitar just screaming its ballad of the epic fight that is taking place at that moment. It's almost like Breath of Fire 3's soundtrack was made by some very talented individuals who were told the story of Breath of Fire 3 and they were told to make the soundtrack for it, but they were never told that it was a high fantasy role-playing game. But it's by breaking from those expectations and focusing on just making an awesome soundtrack that Breath of Fire 3 became one of my favorite soundtracks of all time.
Hi Alex, thank you so much for having me. This is David over at the channel davidvinc, and we're talking about some soundtracks today. More specifically, the soundtrack for Final Fantasy VI. If you've watched my channel for any length of time, you have heard me play some Final Fantasy VI music. More than likely you've heard Searching for Friends in the background, or maybe Terra's theme, which is the overworld theme of the game. Both of them are absolutely fantastic. But that's not just the only thing. Normally, I'm not really one to listen to soundtracks, honestly. I was that kid who had my radio right next to me, listening for songs to play record over on a cassette tape to kind of save for myself, so I would mute a lot of the games that I played, but I never muted Final Fantasy VI. It was just too good. The adventurous theme whenever you're climbing up Mount Koltz with your party to go after Sabin, the battle theme, the haunting music of the Phantom Forest, or whenever you get on the Phantom train and the ghosts are coming after you. The opera scene with Celeste and how she's out there singing for her life, while at the same time you're running after Ultros before he pushes the weight on top of her. All of those musical scores just hit so well. Not to mention Kefka's theme. It's comical. It kind of gives that clown vibe, but at the same time, you know that he's a villain, that he's evil, and you have to go after him. But I think it all culminates in the world of Ruin as you get the airship and you finally have that light of hope. Pandora's box has been opened, but there's still that light of hope there, and you're going after your friends, and Searching for Friends comes on, and you know, hey, you can do this. You can find everyone, you can set the world right, and you can beat Kefka. And that, to me, is why the soundtrack of Final Fantasy VI is the greatest of all time.
How's it going, everyone? My name is Jesse from JessesAuditorium. I wanted to give a big thanks to Alex for letting me talk about one of my favorite soundtracks, which is Chrono Trigger, a game I recently just finished for the first time, but I've been listening to the soundtrack for about a year and a half via people requesting songs for me to check out. One thing I really enjoyed about the soundtrack as a whole is the story behind it. This was Yasunori Mitsuda's first game, which is crazy to think about because he's an icon and a legend who's still going, who was a sound designer at Square and then was so hungry to work on something he basically gave them an ultimatum. Hey, put me on a game to make music or I'm gonna leave. But they believed in this kid and created one of the most iconic soundtracks in video game history. So hungry was Yasunori Mitsuda that he pretty much worked himself to death, as many articles claim, so much so that it was enough to bring back Nobuo Uematsu to finish off the rest of the soundtrack because he was in the hospital dealing with, I believe, stomach ulcers is what I read. So the story behind the whole thing is just mesmerizing as a soundtrack itself. As far as the soundtrack goes, it is right before the dawn of the CD, and pretty much to me sounds like the SNES being pushed to its absolute limits as far as sound quality. A lot of it is still holds up today. But that brings me to the number one reason why I like this soundtrack, and I think many others do, is if you're a fan of the rhythm section of games, meaning the percussion, the bass, and just that general oomph, then look no further than Chrono Trigger. Every song has just this smooth aura of bass and low end and stuff you can kind of like groove and dance to, which is kind of odd because most of the soundtrack is in a minor key, meaning it's kind of sad sounding, more or less. But yeah, all of them you can kind of like groove along to and move. So it's this interesting dynamic of how those two kind of mesh together. Another thing I really like about the soundtrack is the use of time travel in the songs itself. So some songs sound definitely like they're dated to where they belong to. There's a big mixture of ambient sounding songs and traditional sounding songs itself. For example, when there's like a tense moment, you might hear this certain theme that plays over and over. And it just kind of paints this really nice story type of soundtrack, which I really like. A few of my favorites from this soundtrack, out of many, are The Battle with Magus, Secret of the Forest, The Black Omen, and of course, probably most people's favorite is Corridors of Time. It goes without saying that Chrono Trigger is just super iconic, and I think there's a good reason why it lives up to its name, both game and soundtrack, but the soundtrack is absolutely one of my favorites, and you should absolutely go listen to it right now.
Hi guys, my name is bunnytails, and I'm here to talk to you about the music of Persona 5 by Shoji Meguro. I played Persona 5 back in 2020, and I spent well over 100 hours in that game. I think one of the main reasons why it never felt stale was because of how awesome the music is. When I was thinking about exactly what I wanted to say, I was trying to figure out the specific techniques, instruments, fancy words.
Stop this nonsense.
You know what, Sojiro? You're right. I'm not a musician, okay? I'm just a person who plays video games. So I don't really know all about that technical jargon, but you know what I do know? You don't need to be a musician to enjoy the music of this game. That electric piano is smooth. The bass is fierce. It's on fire. The guitar, it's jamming. Oh yeah, it is. And the strings are urgent. Louder for the people in the back. Oh, these songs are jazzy. They're funky. They're fresh. They'll make you want to get up to sing and dance or just bundle up with a cup of coffee and LeBlanc curry on a rainy day. And this soundtrack would not be the same without the powerful, soulful, and angelic vocals provided by Lynn. She sings with energy and attitude in many of the battle themes, making you feel undefeatable as a member of the Phantom Thieves. The Persona 5 soundtrack is also the very first soundtrack that I have ever purchased. I listened to it for months straight. I listened to it while I was in the shower, while I was doing laundry, while I was doing dishes. I listened to it so much that my husband pleaded with me, please listen to something else. That's all you ever listen to. I can't take it anymore.
For real?
What does he know anyway? Now if you'll excuse me, I must go listen to some Persona 5.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tarks the Music Man Gauntlet here to diminish your fifths and augment your fourths so we're all on the same page. When it comes to JRPGs, you have to settle in for a long ride. And that means the game's mixtape of tunes better be loaded with bangers, lest your mood gradually decrease in a retardando of misery. When a game's story is all about music, as is my selection today, it becomes twice as important it nail every cadence. Image Epoch's swan song Stella Glow, a TRPG for the 3DS, is a game that does just that, beating out most other JRPGs with its impressive show of BPM. It's bops per minute. The game itself is a tad bit cliche at its core. Its story events, much like Pokeball's canon in D, you've likely heard before. But its use of witches whose power comes in the form of song magic gives a grand stage for the most epic of symphonies to be conducted front and center. From blazing metal with accompanying orchestras and choral performances, to more chill, laid-back, folk-inspired tunes, and other more streamlined hits utilizing soaring pop-infused vocals, Stella Glow is anything but one note when it comes to its OST. The music here fuses with the imagery of the game, the narrative, and the combat to create one of the ultimate video game operas. Thanks for this OST is primarily owed to Shunsuke Tsuchiya, but also industry veteran and legend Yasunori Mitsuda. The only downside is that the game is still tied to the 3DS, and it doesn't seem like it'll be getting off that system anytime soon. Which is a shame, as Stella Glow easily had the key to succeed, but with the Image Epoch signature attached to it, it never struck the chord it needed to in marketing, and was doomed to the realms of obscurity. These days, speaking as a fan of the game feels more like performing an aria rather than being a member of the choir that should be singing the praises it deserves.
Hey Hey everyone, this is Taylor from TheGamingShelf, and thanks so much, Alex, for inviting me on this collab. Now today I want to talk about a JRPG soundtrack that I think goes really underrated because of how divisive the game itself is, and that is Final Fantasy VIII. Now I absolutely love this soundtrack. It has so many varied pieces, from the intense opening, Libere Fatale, to the more calm Balam Garden. And I'd argue that its boss theme, Force Your Way, is up there with some of the best boss themes in the entire series. It gets a particular glow up with the Black Mage's rock rendition, so go check that out if you haven't. I also love the moment where you could pick different instruments to create a custom song to play for Squall and Renoa's date. I always had to save right before that moment so I could mix and match to create different songs. I just thought that was the coolest thing. But the main reason why this particular soundtrack has stuck with me for all these years is a more personal one. Growing up, I had horrible insomnia and just really had a lot of trouble sleeping, but the one thing that would help me go to sleep was this particular soundtrack. It's filled with so many softer and relaxing tunes like Breezy, Julia, and Fisherman's Horizon. I would make custom playlists, or back in the day, burn CDs, with these relaxing tunes, and it was incredibly healing for me. So while the game itself may not hold up as well, Final Fantasy VIII's music will always be really special to me.
Hello everyone, I'm Food for Dogs. My favourite JRPG soundtrack, a composer who has also worked on these Final Fantasy tracks, an ultra niche JRPG, Legend of Legacy. I've got this exceedingly small soundtrack for Legend of Legacy, but these 10 tracks were enough to turn me into a complete fan of Masashi Hamauzu. It's almost like he entered the game itself and was able to reflect the atmosphere. The game is completely about exploration of a mysterious island called Avalon. The track for Avalon is extraordinary. Croaking frogs. Is there a frog in the game? Filmia. There is so much hidden inside, just like with the game. There are layers and layers and layers. And every time I listen to the tracks, I discover something different. I love the mysterious forest ruins, the singing stones. There's no bombastic battle music. It's music that keeps you going in a rhythm that is in perfect sync with the game. I love Legend of Legacy for how it evokes atmosphere. It is wistful, it is ethereal, it is elegiac, it's beautiful. Legend of Legacy is an immaculate piece of wonder. I couldn't agree more. To me, the soundtrack for Legend of Legacy is Masashi Hamauzu's possibly finest achievement. It is the one closest to my heart. Thank you.
Hello guys, it is TKN here, and thank you to Alex for letting me take part in his awesome video about JRPG soundtracks that make art is gasm. I don't care if your game is flawless in every other respect, if your soundtrack is bad, then I am not going to enjoy it. And when Alex came to me for my particular choice, well, it was always going to be a Falcon title straight off the bat, but in terms of my choice, I went with Trails of Cold Steel 4. Now, Cold Steel 4 here is considered one of the more divisive games in the series. Some people love it, some people aren't too fond on it. However, I'm very much in the camp that favours it. It's my second favourite in the series, next to Trails to Azure. And one big reason for that is because of its OST, which I feel encompasses all of the emotions it needs to at varying points. Whether that be joy, melancholy, or relief, it always has a song that just fits the occasion, and it helps that those individual songs are actually of a good quality, or at least at a good quality. What I will say about Cold Steel 4 though is that it has my personal favourite battle theme in any game I've played, and it really gets me pumped up for all of the battles that it has, because obviously there are a lot of battles in Cold Steel 4, and then you add on stuff like the Final Dungeons theme, the battle with the Divine Knights, all this kind of stuff. There's just so many awesome songs in Cold Steel 4, and I feel that personally, like in terms of OST quality overall, the Cold Steel arc, while it may not be the strongest in the story department, is certainly the strongest in the OST department, and that is saying a lot when I hold Sky and Crossbell in such high regard. But there it is guys, Cold Steel 4, one of the finest OSTs I've ever listened to, and I hope that some of you guys may agree as well.
While choosing the better soundtrack between Personas 3, 4, and 5 is like picking nits, I'll just say that my personal favorite is Persona 4/Golden. Persona 4's tracklist is interesting because it creates contrasts between the high energy and fast-paced lifestyle of the city, as represented by the game's many poppy tunes, with the seeming banality of living in the countryside, represented by calmer and simpler instruments. Then, of course, there's the punchier dungeon tunes, each reflecting the shadows that have taken residence within. And when the serial murder mystery rears its ugly head during your year in Yasuo Inaba, the music becomes sinister, creeping in the background, reflecting the hidden malice that's taken over the town. But if there's one song that I'd give the distinction of being ever so catchy and made all of this more believable to me, it would easily be the Junes theme. I can listen to the Junes song all day long. And speaking of doing things all day, I've been playing a ton of The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and spent the entire weekend playing it. I released my impressions of my first 3 hours of the game in the video up top. It's really more of an excuse so we can talk about the game, so check it out if you haven't yet and share your own stories with it. Thanks to everyone who participated in this video. And if you want to check them out, you'll find links to their channels in the pinned comment. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.